The views and opinions expressed on any program are those of the producers and/or the persons appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of FRC Media, Bristol Community College, or the City of Fall River.
Well, hello. Welcome to Spindle City Straight Talk. I'm Chip.
And I'm CJ.
And it's Hump Day in the Riv. And again, we have tons of things to talk about.
Too many sometimes, I think.
Yeah, always. Someone actually commented to you the other day how easy our job is, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because we have so much to talk about. We never have to worry about filling in a program.
Something we missed on Monday, which I really wanted to...
Well, we just didn't have time, actually.
Well, no, I think we missed it, is the fact that there were 3 shootings over the weekend in Fall River.
Well...
One happened next to my house, and I didn't even know it.
You see how oblivious you come?
Yeah. You don't even know they're happening.
Apparently, the Chamber of Commerce has the same attitude because they said this was a low-crime city.
Exactly.
So we had a stabbing, a shooting a couple of weeks ago. And
great place to retire.
A murder 3 weeks ago. And well, but hey, you're three shootings and.
Yeah,
welcome to the Riv.
They picked up a whole bunch of shells at one shooting, which was along 4th or 5th Street in Morgan, somewhere around that area, which happens a lot in that area. But they had picked up, I want to say 20 or 22 shells, but I'm not going to go there because I can't be sure.
Yeah. But, well, it's very. I will restate the fact that I'm really happy that most of these criminals are not very good shots. They find a lot of casings, but not a lot of bodies.
Not a lot of bodies, exactly.
Hopefully, they never go to a gun range and learn how to actually fire a weapon, but because that would be. It would be horrible.
And after 4 days, we're still looking for a body in the Taunton River from that boat accident. And when a body was found in Middletown yesterday, they thought it was from...
I heard
originally,
the initial news report said it could be.
Right, but then they found out that it was a gentleman who was fishing and fell off the rocks. And so, I mean, it seems that the Bay Area is real busy on collecting bodies. I mean...
Yeah, well, that's the problem. The ocean is even the rivers, any body of water is a dangerous place. So.
Yeah, and the thing that people, my uncle and I were talking about this, and he has a boat. He says it's real easy to fly at high speeds in a boat. The problem is there are no brakes.
Yeah, and when they flip over, you normally get a lot of damage. And I was told from someone who actually knew someone who knew that person, that was a speedboat.
Right.
So they were probably, obviously speed was involved. At the time they were probably going to beat the darkness, and they were, in a speedboat, and they hit a wake and flipped. But
yeah, now a lot of people.
You can watch all the episodes of Miami Vice you want, and watch them. Watch Crockett driving his giant cigarette boat, but. Boats are extremely dangerous. Boat racing is an extremely dangerous sport because normally when they crash, there are severe or fatal injuries with those crashes.
Well, yeah, because you got to remember they flip like this, and you're sitting in a seat here. You get smashed onto the wake, and when you hit it flat down, it's like doing a belly flop on your head.
Yeah, and people remember, they go, oh, NASCAR, but those cars are like tanks. They got all kinds of reinforcing rods and roll bars and stuff like that. I mean, granted, there are serious injuries and deaths in NASCAR, but the fact is they're fairly rare. Crashes are fairly common in those races, but serious injuries are not common because, those things have got tremendous safety. They're inside. There's a cage they're sitting in, basically. So it's not a boat. That's it. You got your life vest, and that's it, baby.
Yep. And in this case, even the life vest isn't helping out because the life vest will keep you afloat.
It's for your buoyancy. Yeah.
So, and the currents along the Taunton River are very high at times. There's strong currents at times. So, I mean, that body could be anywhere between Fall River and, Block Island at this point. I mean,
Yeah.
You never know where that current's going to take you.
Plus, you don't know what kind of radioactive material is going to be on you. I spent hours around and virtually under the Big Mamie when the fire department dive team volunteered to recover all the anodes that are there to retard corrosion on the battleship, and there were none left because they had all rotted off and fallen into the silt. And that would have cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars had they got a commercial dive company. But we went out there and spent the better part of a day. I think I washed my wetsuit 27 times before I got the stuff off it, because that place it's really
It's dirty.
dirty.
It's
but
dirty, yeah.
you know, and like you say, the river is not. People think, oh, it's a river. It's no big deal, but it's dangerous in there. Okay, what are we going to do? School department first, or are we going to do the pot? CJ?
I think the school department first. When you consider the fact that they keep saying we need more money, we need more money, we need more money, but when they get that money, where does it go? Administrators.
Yeah, and
Even Durfee is on the need list. I mean, that tells you something. But guess which schools aren't on the need list? They've made improvements. The Tansy, the Laterno, you know, all the
and where are they located?
all in the North End, where their kids, you know, the Spencer board and all where the kids go
More
to school.
affluent,
Right.
the affluent areas.
Affluent areas and where all the politicians live.
And look, the reality is we understand that the populations are different in those schools. There are a lot of considerations, but, you know, there are tremendous amounts of issues. If environment, educational environment at home, family interaction, about education, there are a lot of factors. But the bottom line is, to me, and I may be oversimplifying, but I don't believe so, because that's their primary job. I believe that there's a problem with the administration in this Fall River School Department that doesn't see these things coming. It's like Providence. We have a mayor that spends half his time out of the city. They have the worst school department in the state of Rhode Island. Now we look at this, half our schools need assistance or intervention. Who's minding the stoa? We had a child walk out of a school a few years ago.
Yep, I remember that.
So we have all these administrators and principals and vice principals and deans of students and all these other ridiculous jobs that all come with big salaries. Does anybody look at the stats? Does anybody look at the attainment levels? Is there any program to ensure that these children are keeping up with educational norms? Apparently not. And if there is, they're not being adhered to. They're not being adhered to. And the answer is always the same. Give us more money. How about appropriately using that money? Find out. That's your job. You can't figure out how to educate our children? That disturbs me. I'm sorry.
I wouldn't apologize.
It disturbs me. It was an apology that was more facetious
I know it was.
than in reality.
I know it was.
But the fact is that, look, you got a PhD, CJ.
Piled high and deep.
Yeah, you got a doctorate degree, but we can joke about it. But that's the
A lot of
highest
work.
level of attainment you can get.
It's a lot of work.
And not only that, it's not some of these people get PhDs in kind of generic stuff like school administration.
Library sciences.
Yeah, exactly. But when you get a PhD in your chosen field, when a person gets a PhD in physics, that person really knows a lot about physics.
That's right.
When someone gets a PhD in nursing like you have, they've got a bachelor's, a master's, and a PhD in nursing. It takes a tremendous amount of knowledge a tremendous amount of study, a much higher level than an average nurse.
And a lot of money.
And a lot of money, exactly. And that has to be respected. And when people who are in charge of the education of children can't figure out how to educate our children, that it is not a money problem. It is a performance problem. Now, didn't our superintendent of schools get fired from a couple of cities
Yes, he did.
when we looked at it?
Yes, he did.
Maybe we should look into why he got fired.
They never like to talk about that.
Of course they don't want to talk about that.
never like to talk about
because
that.
they're politicians. They can say what they want, but they're politicians. What do they want? More money. The answer to everything is give me more help. I can't do the job. In a private industry, they go, you can't do the job? There's the door.
That's right.
See you later. We'll hire somebody who can do the job. In government, it's like, I can't do the job, and I'm politically connected.
Give me
And-
10
and it-
assistants.
Okay, we'll give you 10 assistants and a pay raise.
That's right.
So, you know, and this isn't a new problem. We had the Watson School. This is an ongoing problem in Fall River now for decades, and it's getting worse. Half the schools now, we had 2 schools, 3 schools that had problems. Now we've got half the schools, 50% of the schools, which is actually, if we really want to be accurate, because I remember things that people forget, like we never had deans of students and we
Right.
didn't have a million of these things. But I also remember that this is actually more than 50%. Because we closed the Henry Lord School, didn't we? It's used for a different source now.
Yeah, now it's a community school.
That's right. So that statistic has to be looked at carefully to see if in fact all the schools that used to be schools that are now changed their names and are doing something different, did that come under the purview of this 50, half the school? Or is this actually 60% of the schools or more? So this is really, really appalling.
Well,
It's got the Resilience Preparatory Academy. Is that the name of the Henry Lord School?
No, that's the name of the old Durfee Tech building.
Oh, geez, I can't keep track. It's like, this is like, you know, you can't keep track of the players without a scorecard.
Yep.
They changed the name, but, you know, ironically enough, they changed the name, but the outcome doesn't change.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't.
And that's the tragedy of this. The tragedy of this is that when are the people of this city, and when is the legislative and executive branch of this city at budget time just say no and demand that they know how this money is expended? When are we going to look at eliminating some of, and I think, and we probably still do, we might have to do a study again, but at one time Fall River had the highest ratio of administrators to teachers in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
And it's probably still the same.
And it probably is, because, as I said, you got a PhD. Where I was going with that was, when was the first time you ever saw a dean of students?
When I got to college.
And that's the same time I saw one.
Yeah.
I never saw a dean of students when I went to grammar school, when I went to elementary school, when I went to high school. There were no deans of students, and our student population was much larger.
Yeah.
I graduated one of the biggest graduating classes in the history of Durfee High School. That's when people actually graduated from high school. They didn't leave halfway through. That's another statistic they don't like to talk about. How many people, they talk about their graduation rate, but that's the number of people who started their senior year.
That's right. That's
They don't
that's how
look
they
at the
skew it.
statistic of how many people started their freshman year
Right.
and have graduated, because people would faint if they saw that statistic.
Exactly.
So these are the things that even, and I am not an expert in education, but I can tell you one thing. My son's got a doctorate. My daughter's got 2 masters. So I know about education, and I know that people can be educated because they got educated. And I know that educators are responsible to make sure that people are educated. My daughter taught at UMass Dartmouth. She's still a teacher. Her job is to teach children, and she understands that. So why can't all this administration, all these deans of students, this tier upon tier upon tier of educators, or so-called educators, figure out how to educate our children. This is, because it never ends. And they're going to go back and demand more money, because that's going to be the cure to the problem.
Well, and
Throw
they did
money
that.
at it.
They did that, and they got more money from the state. They were screaming, ranting, and raving that the gateway cities don't get enough money from the state to educate students. So they got more money from the state, and then this is the report that comes out.
And what did we say when we were debating whether we should pay more taxes to build a school? And we were proven right, because they finally admitted they didn't need it.
Yep.
But we're still going to pay them.
Exactly.
And Jaisal tried to get him in early, because that was an issue during a debate. But didn't we say one of our positions was, when everybody's talking about how wonderful this school is going to be and how great this school is going to be, buildings do not educate children.
No, not yet, anyhow.
Yeah. Teachers educate children. Effective programs teach children. Making the children not getting administrative jobs for your friends, that's what educates children. Prioritizing education. And we've been saying this now we've been on almost 7 years? 7 years?
7 years now.
We've been talking about how education reform should be reformed.
Exactly.
And it's deplorable, absolutely deplorable. And then I have to segue into this because
Now it's time.
drove me but it drove me bananas. I don't know if you saw the thing on Channel 10 yesterday about the new program that they have when a child starts throwing things around the classroom.
Clear the room.
Clear the room and let them behave that way.
Exactly.
What moron came up with this one?
Well, that came about, according to the report, that was because teachers can no longer restrain students. When I went to school, if I had pulled a stunt like that, my teacher would have given me a backhand, okay? Honestly, I had a teacher that had a paddle in her desk drawer, and she would use it. But today you can't even restrain a student.
That's ridiculous, CJ. What you're doing is, look, even some of these bonehead psychologists understand the concept of positive and negative reinforcement.
Exactly.
When you train your dog, you have positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. When you train your children, well, most people don't anymore. They just, go in a corner and get a timeout, Johnny, and they don't.
Right.
And the kid doesn't take a timeout, and they wonder why they're having so many problems. But the people who do teach their children that good behavior gets rewards, negative behavior gets gulag. But the reality is, you're going to let somebody in, and then they had a teacher. They interviewed a teacher. She'd been stabbed by a pencil, got stabbed with a pencil, got punched, got abused, and you don't think that allowing this miscreant, whoever that miscreant may be, to throw things around indiscriminately until he or she gets exhausted at doing it, is a correct way to extinguish that behavior?
And as the teachers have said, it's also unfair to the students in that room.
Of course, because what is the big thing that teachers always talk about when we talk about education?
Learning time.
Learning time. Learning time. They talked about minor disruptions in the class interrupting learning time. But now they're going to let some miscreant throw stuff around for 20 minutes until they faint from exhaustion, and then they're going to probably wrap him in cotton and talk nice to him for the next hour and say, Johnny, don't do that anymore. Well, you know something? It's, the lunatics are now running the asylums. And you know something? This is one of the reasons why half our schools, because nobody cares about the kids that are there to learn anymore.
Right.
All they care about is high-paying political jobs and getting more money, and that's why education reform should be scrapped.
Well, the parent to one of those children was on that report as well. And she said, well, what my child needs is a smaller classroom. Well, every child needs a smaller classroom, but you need money to get a smaller classroom. What your child needs is proper disciplinary action.
No, you know, I'm sorry, I have to disagree with her. Because her child actually needs a larger classroom right now, because he's got more crap to throw around.
Exactly.
You know, I'm sorry. Your child needs is a cell.
A rubber room.
Yeah, he needs a rubber room.
A rubber room would be safer.
You know, that goes to show. And I'm sorry, you can disagree with me. I don't care. The fact is, you're not a good parent if you're trying to excuse that type of behavior by your child, let alone in your own home. But in a school where other children are there and teachers are there, to abuse children, abuse teachers, and then you go, my Johnny needs. You're gonna look for a rationalization to allow him to continue a negative behavior. You're a nitwit, lady.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I hear you. Well, let's get on to the Cannabis Control Commission.
Oh no, we gotta hit Joshua Hetzler.
Oh yeah, well that's tomorrow.
Yeah, Joshua Hetzler is challenging it. Good for him. I hope he wins. Nobody should be denied their right to operate in government. And Joe Macy does it again. And because I'm reading directly from the Herald News article. Among Macy's legal lines of reasoning is Hetzler's employer, the Fall River Fire Department, has a number of policies related to school safety. This is a quote. Plaintiff could potentially use his position on a school committee to favor his fellow fire department co-workers by influencing approval of additional fire safety programs in the school, which could translate into overtime opportunities, unquote, wrote Macy. You know something? Everybody on a city council has issues that they have to recuse themselves to. Joe, how did you ever become a judge? That's the weakest argument I ever heard.
Yeah.
All Mr. Hetzler has to do is recuse himself from anything that could impact the fire department, like anybody else on a city council or a school committee can do. Bogus argument. Joshua Hetzler, if the people elect him, belongs on the school committee. Period. Now let's get to the pot.
Now let's get to the pot. That works. Well, the Cannabis Control Commission sent to Joe Macy a letter with a bunch of forms, and I have all the forms and I have the letters, and I sent them to you last night, as you very well aware.
Yep.
And they're asking the city to recertify the letters of non-opposition that were issued, including for the facilities that are open, like Northeast Alternatives. But the person who has to recertify him is the mayor.
The same person.
The same person who's allegedly part of this extortion scheme.
Yeah, exactly. And even if he's still, I don't want to offend Steve Camara by implying that I'm assuming that he's guilty of this, because he is constitutionally innocent until proven guilty. But there are other people who were his co-conspirators who have pled guilty.
That's right.
So they did bribe somebody. They still have to prove that the mayor was involved in a bribery. But the reality is those people who secured those licenses did pay somebody off. Therefore, they entered into a criminal act.
That's right.
So.
That's right. And according to the regulations for the Cannabis Control Commission, if you're guilty of a felony, you cannot have a marijuana license, except, here's the exception, if you're guilty of a felony involving drugs, and you can then get a marijuana license to put you on the right road. Makes no sense to me. Makes no sense to me. Why should government make any sense at all?
Well, how would they do anything that makes sense when they're allowing the same mayor that's been indicted to reissue licenses to people who have bribed them already?
Exactly.
Or have alleged, but they bribed somebody.
Well, so, look, people have pled guilty already.
And there's another article, pot law fallout stacking up in the legislature. I'll tell you what, I thought I would never see something worse or as bad, I don't think it's worse, than our charter. But this pot law, we're actually paying these people in Boston, and they had a big to do about, we're going to do this, dot all the I's, cross all the T's. They had all kinds of meetings and discussions about this, and they came up with this disaster, this commission, this total disaster.
And what's interesting is the state legislature has not touched it since this has gone in effect. They want nothing to do with it. They've left all the regulations, all the disciplinary actions, everything. They've left it in the hands of the Cannabis Control Commission. Nobody else has a say in it. Nobody.
Of course, because...
And now they're going to have to start talking about changing the law, and they don't want to do that.
Well, because then they'll have to admit they screwed it up in the first place. And secondly, look, CJ, you and I have been around long enough to know what commissions are.
That's right.
They're buffers. They're the buffer that takes the heat, so the legislature doesn't take the heat for doing this incorrectly. It's just like, what was the Fire Commission when they were the appointing authority? They were the people who appointed the police commission and the fire commissioners when they were the appointing authorities in this city. They weren't just advisory, which they are now, which kept the paycheck for the political appointees.
Yep.
Because I always complained when I was there about the fire commission being an appointing authority. I said, look, you had a bus driver, a housewife, and a guy that worked at a bar making appointments to the, how can they make appointments? What do they know about professional firefighting? Boston required the fire commissioner in Boston had to have a minimum of 10 years as a chief officer to be appointed as commissioner at that time. But our fire commission was a buffer. That way the mayor, who whispered in the commissioner's ear who to appoint or who to promote, wasn't going to take the heat.
Right.
The commission was going to take the heat. So we got the Cannabis Commission is the buffer for the legislature now, like those commissions were the buffers for mayors. And this is all politics 101 and how they can duck responsibility for everything while they collect their paychecks and their mileage money and all the other money that they collect. So,
Yep.
what are you going to do except vote?
That's what you have to do.
Vote them out.
You got to. And it's interesting because New Bedford just had their primary yesterday.
Yeah.
And their incumbent mayor, who's a very good mayor, by the way, John Mitchell, they have 4-year terms also. He served 2 terms. He served 8 years. And then a city councilor, Brian Gomes, who's also on the city council ballot. So he's in the final election for mayor, and he's in the final election for city council. This is going to be an interesting election.
What a brilliant political move, huh? Because he
missed the withdrawal date.
Gomes said he missed the date to withdraw his name from the race, which is BS. He left it on there. Let's see what happens. So now he's on the ballot. Will he? And he's got 6 days to withdraw from the mayoral ticket.
Right.
But he won't. That's my prediction. I may be wrong, but he won't. Because then the third place finisher would be placed on the ballot. I can guarantee you I know what he's going to say. Well, since my name's on the ballot, I'll let the people of New Bedford decide.
That's exactly what he said for the primary.
Because that's exactly what he said in the primary, and that's what he'll do. And if he gets to be mayor, good. If he doesn't get to be mayor, he gets to say, well, you know, I was really running for city council. I just forgot to withdraw my name. I didn't do that well because everybody knew I really didn't want to be mayor. So what a beautiful political move, Brian. Great, great political move. You've been on a council a very long time. You've learned your politics well.
It's not Fall River alone that does this stuff.
Can't wait to see everybody on Friday because what are they doing tomorrow? They're going to court.
They're going to court. On both cases, the one for Josh Hetzel, which is a federal case, and the one to remove the mayor from office, which is in New Bedford. So, I mean, I don't know how Joe Macy's going to be in both places at the same time, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens here.
Well, good luck, Mr. Hetzler.
Yeah.
I hope you prevail. You should prevail. And good luck, City Council.
There you go.